Manx Radio Podcasts, powered by Shaw.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Hello and welcome to the latest look back at Talking Heads. On the programme this week, the cost of clinicians, concerns over Sellafield, and town and village regeneration were all up for discussion. Here's Stu Peters with more.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
Was this year's Festival of Motorcycling a success from your point of view? The event drew to a close this weekend, with police reporting a significant decrease in serious accidents on open roads this year. How did the 2016 Festival of Motorcycling go from your point of view? Did you immerse yourself in the atmosphere of the event, or did you stay away from it completely? This from Andy says, I visited the grandstand on the Saturday during the Festival of Motorsport. It was very busy and looked great. I returned there on the Tuesday and it was a ghost town. All the so-called big men who get paid a fortune to come over and are paid by the government in the Isle of Man had disappeared, and obviously not interested in real racing, as the MGP had not even had a race by then. The MGP needs to go back to how it used to be and forget about the classic side. How much was it to bring Freddie Spencer, Graham Crosby, Francesco Chili all the way from the other side of the world to do one lap of the course? We need to know these facts before they're invited, and do we really need them here? There's a complete divide between the two events and needs to be changed, and let the Festival of Motorsport find their own dates. Remember, these lads get free entry, so who's paying the track insurance? MGP riders pay over £400 for each bike they enter. Thank you. And it's amazing on this programme that we get such disparate views on things. We just had a long email from Andy saying it was rubbish and all the rest of it, and then we've got a couple here. Best run festival MGP for years. Also, the programme events seem to work well, from one contributor. Stu, the MGP was awesome this year, very successful. My only issue was the Derby Festival, as the bikes in the car park before you actually got into the venue itself were more exciting. More was needed, I find, to make it worth the £5 to get in. And that's from our pal Kev. Thank you, Kev. And Robin Peel called, I volunteer at the Lease Museum in Peel during TT and the Festival of Motorcycling. We get lots of visitors, lots from Germany and Australia. I think that they do a good job with both. It really is good for those 4 weeks. Splendid. Paul Phillips should take a lot of credit for revitalising the TT and the Manx Grand Prix. The extra TV coverage definitely encourages people to come over. Okay. Vintage Motorcycle Club Festival at Derby with the Spitfire air display was sensational. Never seen so many bikes. It was great. Well done. Good. Last caller summed up what many ordinary enthusiasts and supporters thought. What, that it was great or it was rubbish? It depends on what time your text came in, I suppose. I've heard from a lot of disgruntled marshals who say after being stuck on the course for 11 hours twice this year, they're not going to marshal again, says Alan. Sue called, weather-wise it was great, but there were issues with the Ramsey Sprint. The area where all the camper vans usually park is all dug up and has been for months. And the diggers were working that day. Really? Well, the diggers were working that day, so you could hardly hear the commentary because of them. I felt uncomfortable, so I dread to think what the visitors thought of it all. There was no entertainment on except the sprint itself, and as I've said, you could hardly hear that. Well, that seems very non-joined up, doesn't it? To actually be doing stuff that's going to interfere, for the one day or whatever of the event. You'd have thought that they could have taken the day off and done something else. So, this is Paddy. Brilliant meeting, except for those stupid parade laps. Okay, I guess that the powers that be have decided that they're likely to bring people in. I don't know. I don't know that I'd want to travel and incur the sort of expense to travel to an event just to see a former Formula One star, for example, and I'm into Formula One rather than bike racing. So whether or not it works, I don't know. Obviously the organisers think it does. Grand Prix over, hooray, now 9 months of roadworks about to start in Ramsey. Brilliant news. From a fed-up motorist with tongue very firmly in cheek, I would suggest. Well, it could be worse. I mean, we could be starting 9 months of roadworks just before the winter and the cold weather and the rains and all that. Oh, hang on a minute. And Dave says the increase in numbers is only to watch the TT Stars race on Saturday and Monday, and then they go. They're not interested in the MGP. He says MPG, but I don't think miles per gallon are that important in this context. That from Dave. Stu, you could tell from the TV pictures that there were a lot more people around the track. They have to be careful, though, not to just become a TT Part 2, says Melanie. Okay. I think that everybody seems to be quite keen to make sure that it does have a separate flavour, the Festival of Motorcycling to TT, but draw on the strength. So, I think it's a good point, Melanie. Stu, great Festival of Motorcycling this year, great for the economy as it grows year on year. We must do something, though, about the access road. Maybe a traffic light system on the road itself to help flow better. Can't stress how frustrating it is in its current state. If these race meetings are here to stay, then make the locals' lives easier with a better system. Cheers from Steve. Yep, I agree entirely, Steve. And another comment in a similar vein from Pam. I love the atmosphere of TT and Manx Grand Prix, always have, though I'm not a big bike fan as such, and I think the parade laps take away from the racing and are largely a waste of time. Okay. However, I live inside the course and the inconvenience is considerable, certainly for those conducting business and working. I think it's high time that the issue of better access during races was addressed. I appreciate that since the 80s we've had the TT access road, but it's very narrow in places and not fit to take the volume of traffic 30 years on. Plus, if emergency vehicles require access, it has to be closed to all other vehicles until the fire police or ambulance has gone through, says Pam. Stu, it's the parade laps that annoy the marshals. They're there for the racing, but the way the schedule is, the organiser crafty as they put the parade on in the middle of everything. If the parades were on last, the marshals would walk away. Fact. Okay. DED refused to tell the taxpayer how much the classic TT budget is. Have you tried sort of a freedom of information or whatever the current sort of guidelines are? Have you tried asking your MHK to ask for the numbers? I'm sure that there must be a way of finding that out if it exercises you so much to know how much it is. Might not be in great detail because there might be things that are commercially confidential in there, but an overall figure I would have thought they could give. Why did Radio TT stop so abruptly after the last race? I don't know. I didn't know it had done actually, but maybe they ran out of 50 pences for the meter up at the grandstand. Pam called, I love the racing, I followed it every year, but the one thing some visitors did have a concern about was the price of the programme at £20. £20? For a booklet? A lot of the visiting bikers travel light and they really only want the race programme, so maybe they could split the two and sell them separately. If they sold the race programme for £10 and the other magazine with all the articles for another tenner, then people could choose. You might even end up making more money with people buying one than buying the other part at a different time, because at the moment paying £20 altogether seems like a lot of money and it might put some people off. Yeah, I suppose when you go to concerts and things like that, the price of the official merchandise is pretty high, isn't it? £20 sounds like a lot for a programme. Paul says, this was my third festival and the best yet. The Villa Marina delivered great entertainment with DCAC, and the racing and the Classic and the MGP was fantastic. The events were well spread out around the island, which helped with traffic. Classic and MGP visitors do not need fairgrounds and stunt events on the prom like the TT Kiddies. All right, Paul, thank you very much indeed. So a more mature, a more discerning audience then for the festival, you say. Stu, all our guests, this is from Michael at the Welbeck, all our guests seem to be delighted with the whole event. Most of them are booked again for next year. I've heard many comments about the diversity of machines as compared to the TT, which some say is basically just two different bikes, 1000cc or 600cc. Last night, my wife and I were sat outside a well-known local establishment and met some bikers who were having a meal before jumping on the boat. They said it was the best holiday that they'd ever had, and how impressed they were with what the island had to offer apart from the races, which they'd enjoyed so much. From a business point of view, it was easily our second busiest week. Oh, that's good news, Michael. Good. I'm happy about that. Stu, the programme was £10, not £20. Cheers from Harvey. Well, who to believe now, you see? I must admit that at £10 it seems sort of all right. At £20 you'd expect it to be covered in doe skin and embossed with gold leaf or something, wouldn't you? So was it £10 or was it 20? Two different points of view. Let's have a look. Damon Hill was over for the second year running as a fan. I believe so, yeah. A couple of electronic signs would help, saying crossing points open, etc. One at Pulley Bridge and one at Ballinard Road by the roundabout would really help and prevent wasted journeys. That from John. Good afternoon, Stu. Best MGP in years. Well done to all involved, says Andy. Good. MGP has always been considered a place where up-and-coming riders could get a start. Where was the TV coverage of anyone else other than the top two? We all respect John McGuinness, but he shouldn't be getting all the TV time. The marshals and spectators love the parade lap. I wish I had a machine to put in it. My partner is a marshal and knew none of them have ever complained about the parade. Let's keep the MGP as part of our heritage. Different class of people attend. Derby Day was also brilliant. That from Julie, thank you. Some Manx people will always complain no matter how good the event is, yes. Stu, it's widely known that there's no prize money on offer at the Festival of Motorcycling. Riders and marshals alike take part for free. However, I was reliably informed at the weekend that some people on duty in the tower were earning extortionate sums of money. Can somebody from the DED come onto your show to confirm or deny this? Says Bert in Port St Mary. I don't know that it's something that we'd want to cover in this programme particularly, the inner workings of an event like that. I mean, I suppose that there will always be people who are being paid to be there and others who are not. Stu, the official classic TTMGP programme was £10. Regards from Chris. Price of programmes £10, says somebody else. Right, okay, well that seems to confirm that then.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Have the regeneration projects which are being carried out across the island ultimately been a success? Works in progress in Peel at the moment have divided opinion in recent weeks, but the government regeneration manager says the views of the public are taken into account before projects get underway around the island. Aside from the current works in the west, regeneration projects have already been carried out in other parts of the island, including Ramsey, Laxey, Douglas and Castletown. Have the regeneration works carried out around the island so far served to improve the areas, do you think? Has the initiative itself been a success? Would you welcome more works around the island to try and spruce the place up? And a couple of texts in already, keep them coming. They messed up in Castletown, there are less parking places and the way that they marked out is too small. You can't open the door, says Gary. I sometimes wonder about that. Supermarkets are especially bad at that, in that you've got these spaces for cars, but real cars are a lot bigger. It's almost like they're doing them for toy cars. Real cars are a lot bigger, and you get in the space, but then you can't open the door. Crazy. I know, let's have more parking spaces. How do we do that? Well, we just make them smaller. Have the regeneration works improved things? Never. Loss of parking, stupid speed humps, peeling, flaking tarmac, pointless roundabouts, poor design, loss to business and visitors with 1 hour parking, with wardens lurking in doorways. And finally, in all my days, I've never seen such shoddy third-rate workmanship. Facts from Frank. See, and people tell me that Ramsey's quite nice now. I thought it was super last time I was up there, Frank. It's a wonder anything ever gets done with all the prophets of doom on the island complaining about how things that need upgrading are not done to their liking. It's just as well the prom's not in Peel. It'd take decades longer to start than it has already, says Cliffy. Could it take any longer than it's taken at the moment? But I know your point. You see, this is one of the things that it's one of the modules that I didn't get right on me naturalisation papers, that to become a Manxman. I can do trade allure and I can do telling people about that boat in the morning, things like that. But I do still quite like change. Just for the sake of it at times, I think that if you've got something that you're not terribly happy about, then it's great to change it. Whereas in the Isle of Man, there are lots of things that we're not happy about, but also we don't like change. So it's just a sort of a circle of doom, that, isn't it? You've got to change things at times. And I quite like the idea of changing things, especially if it's not forever. I mean, there are certain things I appreciate that you don't want to knock down landmark buildings or things because you're never going to get them back. But in terms of different road surfaces or different road layouts and things like that, I think you can try them. And I think that generally speaking, once people see them, not while they're being done, but once people see the finished thing, generally speaking, I think people like them. But let's go to the lines. We've got Vivian on about Ramsey. Hello, Vivian.
I suppose what they've done is interesting. They've taken away quite a bit of parking in Ramsey, and that's in the end of the street they've refurbished.
Right.
But they haven't finished the street off. They've only gone as far as East Street, and then they've left the rest all the way up to Parliament Square, which actually is the entrance to the town these days, because it's a one-way system. They haven't done anything at all, not even resurfaced the place.
Right.
And it sort of spoils it.
I suppose they've got to put sort of geographic limits to the area that they're going to do, haven't they?
Well, then why not leave it alone until you can afford to do the whole lot?
Oh, well, that's probably never going to happen. Isn't it better that they do it bit by bit rather than just not do it?
I don't think it's fair on the shopkeepers.
Okay.
They try to keep their properties tidy, the majority do,
Yeah.
and keep them painted, and then they only get half a street done. That's not very fair.
Okay, but I'm fairly sure, and I stand to be corrected on this as ever, but I'm fairly sure that we've had calls from people in Ramsey saying that trade's gone up recently since the refurbishment works.
We've got an awful lot of empty shops again, and I'm serious when I say that.
Well,
and an awful lot are moving into a different area of the town,
Right.
so you're going to have more empty shops.
yeah.
So they want to, if they're going to regenerate one part of the street, they need to do the rest to encourage people to put shops in there as well.
I think we're going through an era of changes as far as retail's concerned, Viv. I don't know if you've thought this one through. That, you know, with the internet now, there are so many people buying things from the internet that the traditional town centre is probably gone forever. So what you'll find is that there are certain shops that sell things that people are now buying on the internet that will close down, but something else will come in, you know, and replace it. And I think we're going through.
You can't be going into a shop and seeing what you're buying.
Well, that's an argument that I understand, definitely. But a lot of people.
I might be old-fashioned, but
Yeah.
you don't. You can think something is wonderful that you see in a catalogue or on the internet or wherever you like, but when you get it, sometimes it can be very disappointing.
Yes, it can, but also sometimes you can be very pleased with it and you've bought it for a fraction of the price that you'd pay in your local town or village.
I'll believe you.
I'm not making a case for it. I'm just saying that I think that retail is changing, and so I think it'll be a different mix of shops in high streets in future. Hopefully, there won't be a lot of empty units, but there'll be different sorts of shops.
But in Ramsey, it's not happening. Not in the piece they haven't refurbished.
Gotcha.
So that's all I'm saying.
Yep. Okay. No. Okay. Valid point.
Thanks, Ben.
Thanks very much for calling, Viv. Manx crab syndrome yet again. I'm only speaking for Ramsey here, but the town on the whole has improved vastly since the regeneration. Yeah, I've heard this from a few people. It's much busier, far nicer for tourists that arrive on Market Square in the coaches. Yes, there are a few empty shops further down, but in comparison to similar towns in the UK, I don't think that it's not bad at all. It has more to do with landlords expecting overinflated rents on these shops, and that is a fact. Cheers, Stu, from another Stu. Good. Now, we've heard from somebody, I think it was Stu in Ramsey, who said that he thought that the improvements had really improved the place. We've got John on now, who I think disagrees. Hello, John.
Oh, yes, you hit a sore point with me there.
Go on, then.
I was born and brought up in Ramsey,
Yes.
and over my lifetime, I have watched these clever people literally destroy the place, ruin the atmosphere, ruin everything. It started out, I'll stand corrected on this, I think it was the 60s, maybe not that decade, but I think it was the 60s, when they pulled South Ramsey down. Fair enough, it needed it. But they built what can only be described as a concrete jungle. For instance, King's Court. I was always led to believe when you build something, it had to fit in with
Yes.
the surrounding area.
Yeah.
Where does King's Court fit in apart from Benidorm?
Yeah, well, yeah.
You know, I mean, it's just the ugliest building on the island. Now, then you move on to the marketplace, which they've just done. The marketplace with the car park in the middle was, in fact, a big roundabout. It was a one-way system right round.
Yeah.
Now, it's crazy what they've done down there. I mean, absolutely crazy. Even the lamppost, which was an iconic feature, they've moved to the other side of the road, and it could have been left where it was.
Gotcha.
Parliament Street, the one-way system, they reversed it. Totally wrong, because now you get out from the driver's side to the pavement, your passengers throw their door open into the traffic.
Yeah.
Should never have been reversed.
True.
Parliament Square. Now, I ran the first driving school in the north of the island, 1960. I ran it through the 60s. I said then the only answer for Parliament Square, because even then it was a problem, was a roundabout. Nobody would listen. And what did they do? They put traffic lights in. Now, 5 o'clock, 5:30 at night, the traffic is backed up to the bus station and backed up to the Stone Bridge the other way. Whereas a roundabout, and they said, oh, there's not room. roundabouts around the island in half that area.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's absolutely crazy.
Well,
and the people in Peel that are complaining now, they should have come to Ramsey and seen what a mess they've made of Ramsey. They've knocked the whole character out of the town.
Well, you say that, John, and I respect your point of view on it, but Ramsey is one of my earliest memories of coming to the Isle of Man, because I had an uncle who was a butcher on the quayside in Ramsey in the 60s, around about 64, 65, and I spent a week with him when I was a young lad, and when I came back to live in the island, I went up to Ramsey and I thought it really hasn't changed very much at all compared to then. I mean, maybe the concrete jungle part of the town has changed. I can't remember that at all from when I came in the 60s. But apart from that, it was still very identifiably Ramsey. I mean, if you buy the quayside there, then there's very little change, really, is there?
No, but do you need change for change's sake?
Sometimes,
surely
yes.
It's done sympathetically with the surrounding area.
Yeah.
Not. Well, as I say, look at King's Court. Where does that fit into the surrounding area?
Like you say, it is very Benidorm, yeah.
And yet, if you want to change your windows, you can't get planning permission.
Right, yeah.
I just wonder what they're going to do next, because as far as I'm concerned, they've destroyed Ramsey. The slabs round the courthouse, they're fair enough, and the War Memorial, but not in the street. You've got these stupid little bits of pavement sticking out here and there. They've destroyed it.
Right.
Absolutely destroyed it.
Fair dues. Thank you very much for your comments, John. It's always good to hear from you. I was talking earlier on about the trouble with these paving slabs is that they seem to show things like chewing gum more than the old tarmac used to do, or the old brick-type surface. And Pete sent me a link to a BBC story, Gumboards Tackle Sticky Problem. Chewing gum fans are being urged to stick their used pieces on city centre lampposts. Gumboards have been set up in Preston, Lancashire, to stop people throwing their old chewing gum onto the pavement. The boards are coated with a peelable plastic, which is removed every day. They've already helped to reduce gum litter by nearly 80% in the city. That's in Preston, Lancashire. And that goes back a while. That's a 2005 story, but I wonder whether or not something like that might help. There will always be people who sort of, don't do their bit, I suppose. Afternoon, Stu. Like so many others, I despair at the eyesore which occupies the former bus station in Douglas. Also, the state of the Villa Arcade is awful. I would have a party of prisoners out and around the island cleaning such places. That from Norman. Thank you, Norman. Quite right about the traffic lights in Ramsey. Ridiculous, says one contributor. Stu, what happened to the £120,000 machine the Corpy have that hasn't been used much, and now we pay a UK firm to come over to do the job, asks Andy. I don't know the answer to that, I'm afraid. Your last contributor, John in Ramsey, if he had his way, we'd still want Model T Fords driving on the roads rather than the modern cars we have now. Time moves on and we must move with the time, says Pat. Well, yes, but the buildings he was talking about certainly aren't part of the local vernacular. I think that's what the sort of word that they use on grand designs. Not that there's anything wrong with them. I'm sure that they're lovely places to live, but they do look very out of place, don't they? Stu, room in Ramsey to expand your coffee shop empire. Lots of cafes in town. Sure, you'd be welcome. Myself and Frank would be regulars, says Mickey. Good reason not to go there, then. Thank you very much indeed.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Should the Isle of Man take a stronger stance over concerns raised about Sellafield? A BBC programme broadcast on Monday night looking into the operation of the nuclear reprocessing and decommissioning site has caused some discussion. Local Cumbrian MP Jamie Reid asked an urgent question on the matter in the House of Commons yesterday. The television investigation centred on claims from a whistleblower, a former senior manager at the plant. It alleged the facility had too few staff and radioactive materials were stored in degrading plastic bottles. The UK's Nuclear Decommissioning Authority and Sellafield Limited have released a joint statement in response.
Sellafield is safe, there is no question about that. Maintaining safety is the priority at Sellafield. Employees work around the clock every day to ensure that the site is safe today, tomorrow and in the future. It is disappointing that despite giving BBC Panorama access to Sellafield and spending a significant amount of time explaining complex issues, the programme painted a negative picture of safety that we do not recognise. Sellafield Limited rightly operates in one of the most regulated regulated industries in the world, and current safety performance is excellent and improving, and workers are making great progress in cleaning up Europe's most complex nuclear site on behalf of the UK taxpayer.
So, should the island take a stronger stance over the concerns which have been raised? Did you watch the programme yourself, Panorama, the other day? I did. I must admit, it did come across as though Homer Simpson was running the nuclear plant, but maybe it was edited to look that way, and that seems to be the view of the authorities. Or do you think that the island continuing to monitor the situation is the right route to go down? Tell us your thoughts. Robin Peel called. He said there does seem to be a rise in the number of people, particularly younger people, with rare cancers since Chernobyl. The same could be happening with Sellafield, of course. We have more cases of rare cancers on the Isle of Man these days. When I was young, it didn't happen as much, but it does seem to be more prevalent nowadays. Good point, I don't know. And one thing I do know is that I expect that the authorities would keep that information from us if it was true. Because it seems that there's very little that they can do about it, so they wouldn't want to admit to that, I don't suppose. Dave says, send Frank, with a big smiley face, he says, send Frank over with a brush and shovel, he can clean it up for free for the Manx taxpayers. Well, I'd act as his agent, you see, and we'd want danger money as well, so that adds a tenner a day to the job. It might make it too expensive. You'd have thought, I mean, one of the concerns that was highlighted by this programme is that they've got sort of radioactive liquid in plastic bottles, which have started to biodegrade. So the answer to that, I think, is quite simple, in that whenever we talk to green campaigners, they talk about these carrier bags that you get from supermarkets that don't degrade for 1,000 years. All we need to do is to double bag them in those. Easy, simple, sorted. When I was studying energy-related stuff a few years ago, says Alice, I saw various different figures for the cost of nuclear energy, including the clean-up costs. The official figures that are done in support of nuclear energy usually make it look like it's good value. Yes, they do. But if you look at the small print, they've applied a heavy discount rate. This is like the opposite of interest. Basically acts to disregard or magic away future costs, especially costs like those for nuclear clean-up that are massive costs running over decades. Thanks, Alice. That's kind of my understanding of this, that we're all told it's clean and cheap and all the rest of it, but actually when you look at over £100 billion, and I think it was significantly over, I can't remember, was it 120, 160 billion pounds? Huge amount of money to just close down Sellafield alone, forgetting all the other nuclear plants around the UK. It is scary. So, what's the actual cost? I think, whole life figures need to be given for whether or not it is a viable alternative energy source. I don't know whether it is or not, but like I say, I'm not an expert. So let's go to the lines. We've got Eddie on. Hello, Eddie.
Well, I've had views all my years on this, on the nuclear power thing.
Yeah.
And I think some of the figures that were put out in the programme were, say, for instance, whilst Sellafield was actually being used, and now, right up to now, it is about £13.5 billion or something.
I don't know.
And it's still costing money.
Oh, yeah, and it's going to cost a lot more in the future as well.
Donkey's years, isn't it?
Yeah.
Years and years ago, I always thought, why can't we do a proven thing? I always thought there was like a gamble in this nuclear power, and it's proved to be right, hasn't it, really? With Chernobyl and the cost of everything, unforeseen costs. But I've always maintained that hydroelectric, it doesn't pollute anything.
Sure.
It's using something that's already there, and there's no clean-up cost afterwards.
Yes.
When it's come to its life, you renew that engine. It's a turbine.
Yeah.
It could be a series of 6 or 7 turbines. I think we had 2 of them lying in a hangar up at Jerby for a while after the Sulby Dam, didn't we?
I don't know. I expect that we'd have to dam an awful lot more valleys and things. I don't think that the current hydroelectric thing is enough to drive much. So we'd have to have an awful lot more of them. But
I'm not talking about us. I'm talking about in England. Through the British Isles, we have lots and lots of lake districts. In Wales, for instance, there's one dam. It's right high up in the mountains.
Dinorwic, is it? Or is it? I'm not sure if it's Dinorwic or not. But yes, go on.
Yeah. But what they do with that one is the water comes down from the lake at the top into turbines to make the electricity, And then at night, when nobody's using the electricity, it's pumped back up.
Yes.
It does a cycle. Also, I was telling, what's her name here?
Catherine.
I was telling Catherine that I watched a program once, and it was, like in third world countries where water is so precious. It's only a small river, this. And what they did is they had the Archimedes screw.
Yeah.
And they didn't just have one. They did it every 20 metres or something like that. There was an Archimedes screw. So it was using the water again and again and again.
Yeah.
And this small stream, by the time it had finished, had supplied enough electricity for all these tiny villages all the way along.
Okay.
Now, my theory is this. Like, say, when they did the Sobe Dam, they were going to put the turbines up there.
I thought we had turbines in there.
We did, but two of them didn't fit, seemingly. But beside the point that, I mean, my theory is this. You get these absolutely brilliant mathematicians do all these figures, and the minute it's gone through them turbines, it's pumped back into a stream. Right, now that stream water, like I was saying about the Archimedes screw, could be used again and again and again. So why not a series of them? When you've got one river, you can produce electricity over and over and over again.
Gotcha. Okay.
And these are things that are not going to cost us billions of pounds to clean up.
Yeah, sounds like a good plan.
That's the main point I was trying to get through to you, yeah.
Yeah, no, that works for me. Thank you very much, Eddie. So, more hydroelectric, you think?
I do, yeah. I think we should go to clean. I mean, there's loads of companies who are working on these underwater tidal things. They're not going to pollute the water. They're not going to cost a fortune to clean up afterwards, are they?
No.
Just drop a new engine in its place when it's knackered.
Well, I just worked out, back of the fag packet calculations, that the clean-up costs at Sellafield, if it was 120 billion, I think it was probably more than that they cited in the programme on Monday, divided by the number of people in the UK, it's going to cost every man, woman, child and baby in the UK £2,000.
Yeah, and the rest,
you're talking about a chunk of money there, really, aren't you?
Yeah, and that's only the clean-up. That's not the original.
That's right, yeah.
Paid to build it in the first place.
That's just the decommissioning cost. All right, Eddie, thank you very much for your call. This from Buster Stewart. I've been around Sellafield, and the first thing that hits you is the extent of rust. Looks like a dilapidated site. The control room was like you see in an office building in the 60s. There's no doubt that we're open to risk. It's a question as to when. What's the government plan in case of a serious leakage, asks Buster. I expect, maybe I'm too trusting, but I expect that there is some sort of a contingency, emergency plan in place for that sort of thing. But I don't know. And it's one of those things that I hope never to know, because I presume if there is a plan in place, then we'll only find out about it if something goes horribly wrong. Afternoon, Stu. Well, it's not the first time Sellafield has had an accident. Ask any farmer in the north of the island about the 60s one. Plus, I had a friend who worked there once. Now, that's something I could tell you about, says Gary and Ramsey. I don't want to know, Gary. Best to not know about things like that. You can only use Archimedes screws every so many metres in a river if there is sufficient fall between the units to provide potential energy to be tapped, says Stuart. OK, well, I'm not a physicist or a civil engineer, but I take the basic point, I think, that Eddie was making, that, that sort of clean energy seems on the face of it to be a much better idea. And this whole idea about having water in a reservoir that then goes through turbines to generate electric, goes into a settling pool and is then pumped back in off-peak times is not terribly efficient, I don't suppose. But, I suppose what you're doing is that you're looking at that reservoir as an energy bank almost, aren't you? And it's a case then of using it when you most need it. So I can see the point in it, but it's just how efficient that whole thing is and how many more hydroelectric plants we'd need around the British Isles to satisfy demand if we didn't have any of the alternatives. Not an expert on it, but yes, it was worrying, the programme, I thought, on Monday. But I've decided it's not something that I'm going to worry about because I've got enough to worry about already.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
You're listening to the latest Talking Heads podcast featuring highlights from the programme over the past week.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
is it inevitable that the island has to pay more to attract qualified medical staff to work here? Paying clinicians on the island up to £40,000 more than their UK counterparts is a justifiable expense, according to the Department of Health and Social Care. As we heard in the news, an information request from a member of the public has revealed that our highest paid consultants are on £132,000 a year, whilst their colleagues in NHS England make just shy of £97,000. So is it just part and parcel of being an island, do you think? Is paying more to attract medical professionals the only way of securing quality staff for the island's health service? Or is the island over-generous with taxpayers' money again? Our first contributor says, Stu from the Manx Independent, patient waits 9 months for an MRI scan. That's quick. My wife has suffered with her back for years and had to wait 2 years, 3 months to get a scan. She's now got an appointment to go back to the hospital on September the 23rd next year. But in the meantime has been prescribed powerful painkillers. This is not acceptable. We've paid our NI contributions for 45 years. Plus, yet non-UK workers who've only been here for 5 minutes seem to be able to get treatment. When asked the DHSS why, I'm told it's down to age. The younger you are, the more chance of getting treatment to get you back in work. And somebody says, hi Stu, if you're ill and you need the skills of these consultants to make you better, it doesn't matter what they cost. Yeah, and I'm guessing that's part of, just playing devil's advocate, and I've got no axe to grind with doctors, but, I wonder if that's how the health service has evolved to what it has, where people get paid very attractive salaries for doing the job. I mean, again, just playing devil's advocate on this one. What's the difference between a consultant and a car mechanic, for example? They both have your life in their hands. If a mechanic doesn't fit the brakes properly, you can die. And they also spend a long apprenticeship learning the ropes of the job, and they've got to take tests and things before they're signed off as fit to operate. And they cost a lot more than doctors. No, the dealerships cost a lot more than doctors would, but the actual mechanics I don't think do. So, I mean, are there that many differences, or is that why we seem to pay people in the health service so much money? Because when we need them, we really need them. We don't care what they cost. If you've got a point of view on this one, share it with us. Give us a call, send us a text, send us an email. They should do like they do in London, says somebody else. Pay London waiting, payment over and above the standard wage while working here, not on salary boosting pensions, etc. Okay. Hospital here prioritise private treatments before national insurance treatment. Fact is, they try and encourage patients to go private. I think that's a point of view. I don't know if it's actually true, but it's a point of view that I've heard from a number of people that, 2-3 year waiting list, but if you're prepared to pay, you can go tomorrow and you'll be treated by exactly the same people in exactly the same facilities. Now, that is something that bothers me very deeply, and I understand the thought that, all right, but for every person that's prepared to pay privately, it takes somebody else off the NHS waiting list, so it works for everybody. I'm not convinced by that argument, but I don't know about you. God help us, surgeons the same as car mechanics, says Dave. Your body a rust bucket, Stu. Well, if you pay peanuts, you get monkeys. Okay, and Stu, a Harley mechanic can change the fluid, so can a surgeon. A Harley mechanic can fix a broken wire, so does a surgeon. A Harley mechanic can replace a valve, etc., so can a surgeon. See, you're agreeing with me. Only one of them does it with the engine running, though. Sting in the tail of that one. Good. Okay. We've got more comments by text and stuff, but we've got Ken on the line now, so let's go to the lines. Hello, Ken.
Worth the waiting. Gold, having had 2 hip replacements in the last 9 months. I haven't been on the waiting list only a year.
Yeah.
But my main concern is, people keep asking me, you hadn't done in Liverpool, did you? No. Nobles.
Right.
Oh, did you? Oh. So I don't know whether we still send people away. Or we do all hip-hop. I'm just talking about hip operations.
Yes.
Have the knees done. But do we still send people away unless, if they're touchwood reasonably simple hip operations?
I don't know.
And the only other way I've got is because you overstay your welcome because there's other things wrong with you, and you block a bed.
Yeah.
So there's no beds, so in theory you can't do any operations. Well, you could do operations, but there's nowhere to put the patients to recover. So what do the consultants do then?
You see, you're asking somebody with no medical qualifications at all.
Maybe we don't have enough beds if we're still sending people away.
I thought we were closing wards to save on heating.
I do wonder about. Again, though, pay a consultant's not clear with a press article. You don't really believe everything in the press, but in England, seemingly they get extra payments for
Yes, they do.
bonuses or something. Well,
Yeah, well, on the face of it, we're paying about 40% more than the equivalent job would be worth in the UK. But Dr. Couch has said that, in the UK, there are extra things that people are expected to do that they get extra payments for, and they're kind of included in the salary in the Isle of Man, is roughly what he was saying. So, how closely you can compare the amounts of money, I don't know. But I got the feeling from what he was saying that the tone of it was that yes, we do pay a bit more than they do in the UK because that's the only way we can get good people.
well, yes, and I do wonder whether the good cost government more money because you have to pay more national insurance, but that's all going into the one, our pot, I think would say, for the national insurance, so you have to add on more, but, the rest are paying tax and, things like that.
Yep, all right, fair dues. Thanks very much, Ken. I need to move on because we've got Neil on.
I think it's absolutely disgraceful, to be honest, that anybody should be paid 40% more than the national average in the UK.
Yes.
We've got a lovely island, a wonderful and very beneficial taxation system, particularly for those at the very, very top of the economic tree.
Yep.
It's not so good for those people at the very bottom who very often don't even qualify for income tax. They are feeling the cuts, the pressure, the housing costs, etc., etc.
Because they suffer from the high cost of living but don't have the benefits of the decent salary.
Exactly. They suffer from the high cost of living but no benefits of the extra salary. My view is very simple. I think it emphasises the massive class divide on the Isle of Man.
Yeah.
I think there are so many young people that I work with who are struggling to get a house, get a home, and the rental costs are massive. Some of them don't qualify for income tax, and they've no idea or ideals at all of being able to save for a house. And we have these people, and it isn't just in the medical profession. It's management in aerospace, it's management in financial services.
Oh, education, all sorts of areas, yeah.
Management within government circles, education, you're absolutely right. There's a massive, massive living divide on the Isle of Man. I think it's disgraceful, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, I remember when I was a young fella, when I was a teenager, I used to look in the Manchester Evening News at the bands, musicians, artists column of the classifieds to see who was selling what guitars and which bands wanted a drummer or whatever. And they often had a thing that they'd put in there where they'd say drummer required for rock band or whatever, or bass guitarist wanted for pop band. Breadheads need not apply. So if you were motivated by money, then, don't bother because that's not what this is about. And I kind of wonder about the medical profession. If the only way that you can motivate somebody to come and work here is by giving them a big suitcase full of money, then are they the right people anyway?
Exactly. I mean, you see the nurses who are on a lot less pay on the coalface than in our hospitals, and they're absolutely great, but I don't agree with this at all. I think people should not view coming to the Isle of Man as simply a breadbasket. The Isle of Man has much more to offer, and indeed it offers so much more. I'm very much against the tax cap, as you know. I think that's another disgraceful thing which the Isle of Man has got in place.
Yeah.
I think we've really gone back to the Victorian era where we have a massive, massive class divide between those at the bottom and those at the top. And I'm certainly supporting the Labour Party in the current elections this year. I think it's about time that we really try to fight back and find some justice for people who are at the very, very bottom. And I'm not at the bottom. I'm midway. I'm relatively, okay and well off.
Yes.
But I work with many people who are under enormous pressure financially, particularly in regard to housing, rents, food, and just the basic standard of living. And when I see people at the very top on 40% more, I think is an absolute disgrace, to be frank.
All right. Always good to talk to you, Neil, and you raised some very important points, I think, and make them well. Thanks very much for getting in touch. If you don't pay more, you won't get any doctors. They can't get enough nurses, but they won't pay them more. They'd rather pay £100 an hour for temporary staff because that comes out of a different financial pot, says Dave. Right. If anything, older people should be more entitled to health treatment because they've probably paid more into the system, says David H. How much are we spending on agency nurses and doctors? Maybe put wages up working on work experience. Let's get full-time staff. Save a fortune of taxpayers' money, says Les. What rubbish from your last caller. You spend years training and only expect peanuts for your hard work put in. He's living in cuckoo land, says Dave. I disagree. I think you made some very good points, Dave, but there you go. And there are lots of jobs where you spend years and years training, not leastly nurses who don't earn a fraction of what the consultants earn. I couldn't agree more with the previous call. You see, I do love that about this programme. No, he was wrong. No, he wasn't. He was completely right. Within 2 texts. I couldn't agree more with the previous caller about the divide here as regards earnings. The lack of affordable housing would deter anybody from working here. Good, okay. No company in the private sector would pay 40% above a UK rate. If you need to motivate staff to come here by increasing the salary by 40%, then that tells you that they're only coming here for the money. I have a friend who's a consultant. He says in the consultant's world, it's do 2 years over here to get the extra cash, then get out. The payment structure is one that the monies are paid as being self-employed so they can get out before paying any deductions. Wow. Hopefully government will be looking at that to make sure that people aren't abusing the system. A few years ago my wife broke a leg and we went to Nobles, who were very good, x-rayed a leg and said that they'd put it in a cast for about 5 months. Then my wife informed them that we actually had Bupa. We never said at first because we thought it would make no difference, but after informing them we had Bupa, a specialist appeared. She was in surgery within the hour and had plates put in the leg, no cast. She was back driving a car within 2 weeks. Now, whether it's right or wrong, who can say? Just because we opted to pay for Bupa insurance rather than, say, going to the pub. Unfortunately, you get what you pay for in this world. That's from Brian in Douglas. Quote that for truth. Absolutely, Brian. I've been considering seeking private treatment for a minor procedure which I've been waiting for, says Pam. I don't want to do this as it goes against the grain after having paid into the system all my working life. However, typically, would you believe, although I've been referred and have seen the consultant who will be carrying out the procedure on the NHS off Ireland, but no one can tell me how much going private would be. I have to take up my GP's valuable time to ask him what the private medical cost could be. This is surely not the province of a GP. It's an admin matter for the accountants at Treasury. I would have thought, is there nowhere on the government website where this information can be found, or at least some indication of it? I suppose that every case is individual, so they can't really give sort of guideline prices, I would have thought, but I don't know. Sorry, Stu, no one would go through the trauma of uprooting yourself or your family to move over here for the same salary. It's a no-brainer, says Dave. I disagree with you, Dave. I think that's a very cynical view. So you're saying that the only reason that anybody would move to the Isle of Man is because they're getting more money? No, I dispute that all the way down the line, I'm afraid. I had an agency nurse in the taxi boasting that she was on £70 an hour on the last bank holiday weekend. £70 an hour on the last bank holiday weekend. That's a good morale booster for full-time nurses, isn't it? Well, not really. Same with physio. Half the staff are locums, both at Portair and are locums. They get 6 months free accommodation. When that runs out, they move on, says Liz. Seems very cynical, that, doesn't it, for the caring profession. A friend of ours is an agency nurse and always in full-time work. She prefers to work for an agency as she can earn at least 50% more a year than a state nurse who doesn't get paid for any extra hours they work. Agency nurses get paid for every hour on duty, which is the way it should be, isn't it? If you're working, then you should get paid for it. I think it's unreasonable to expect people to be paid for, 35 hours a week and actually do 55 hours a week. It's completely unreasonable.
The Nation Station, Manx Radio.
Is setting targets to cut carbon emissions actually worthwhile? The Isle of Man has a target of reducing the island's greenhouse gas emissions by 80% compared to 1990 levels by the year 2050. In an attempt to move towards achieving that target, the first in a series of 5-year action plans was put before Tynwald in July. But today, across the water, MPs are warning that the UK is set to miss its targets for sourcing energy from renewables by the end of 2020. Under EU goals, 15% of energy, electricity, heat and transport should come from green sources. A report says missing the target will undermine confidence in the UK's determination to meet other long-term goals. Is setting firm targets on cutting emissions worthwhile, or are they likely to be unattainable? Are people making big sticks to beat themselves with? Is it vital for the island's reputation that it has its own targets, or would you like to see them scrapped altogether? Let's go to the lines. We've got John on who I think wants to talk about this. Hello, John.
I think it's absolutely critical that the island has a very strong stance on that whole issue of sustainability.
In terms of what, though? In terms of perception outside, or...?
No, I think it's yes, the external perception is important because, we have the potential in the island, given the nature of our political system, the nature of the island, to become a world centre for sustainable practice, and which leading into carbon reduction, right across the whole gamut. And if we're losing or have lost so many other potential income strands, the sort of everything,
Financial services, things like that.
Yeah, financial services, all that. I mean, they're sort of dying back. I mean, we're coming into a world that is totally changing from what we've become used to.
Mm.
And clearly, the whole issue, we're approaching. I mean, things like peak oil are hitting. What is going to be the outcome of that? In terms of world price of petroleum, etc. The island, we have potential to produce biofuels on the island. We have a whole raft of sort of initiatives that could be undertaken and are being looked at. Generally, certainly, we, myself, and others who of like mind are looking at stuff like this.
Yes.
And I know it's going to start to come through in the next year or so. I mean, as you know, we've been developing a housing system for some considerable time, and that's coming up. We've already got people on the island now who are building to passive house standard. Government has built the passive houses at Janet's Corner. I mean, it's all in the fix now, and it's just a question of working out what best works with and will fit the model that the island needs.
Okay.
And but certainly setting very strong targets and then working positively to get towards them. I mean, we've got the election coming. We don't know what the face of our Parliament's going to be until for another few weeks yet.
Yes, yeah.
And the hope is that we get some very strong candidates in, people with a very good diverse background, who are passionate about the island and who really want to make a difference.
I have to say I'm quite sad that we didn't do more as far as electric cars were concerned. I know that we did the TT0 motorbike racing. We still have the electric motorbikes, don't we, during TT. But in terms of, we're such a small place that these range problems that other people talk about, we don't have motorways that people can be on for 200 miles where the batteries would wear out. So I'm sad that government didn't say, well, actually, in the UK you can get, a couple of grand towards an electric car. We'll make it £5,000. We'll do them at half price and try and get as many people into electric cars as possible.
That's one of the many initiatives. But again, you see, it's the whole thing of energy storage, battery storage. There's lots of developments going on with new forms of energy storage, which are going to, in many ways, revolutionary the concept of electric cars. But at the moment, the technology is relatively, is extremely expensive. So, I mean, again, who can afford this kind of vehicle?
Yes, I suppose it's not very smart being an early adopter, is it?
Well, it's like, you remember mobile phones. I mean, the first great big bricks, which ran into thousands. Same with fax machines.
My widescreen telly cost me a best part of £2,000, and you can buy them now for about 200.
Well, yeah, that's it. You think the first Apple computers you could buy, I think our first one was about £4,000.
Yeah.
Now you can pick them up for £200 or £300.
But what that means, though, John, is that we're never going to be at the forefront of any of this stuff if we are going to wait for things to reach mass acceptance. That's the problem with it, of course.
We've got to lead ourselves. We've got some. I mean, there's some incredible links. With sort of think tanks all around the island, all around the world into the island. And they're starting to come together and they're starting to talk and they're starting to network. And so, I'm convinced that over the next year we're going to see some dramatic stuff coming through.
Okay.
And, it's going to potentially transform the face of the island. I mean, we've got, the government has already got this. We've got this development fund where it could link into sort of all sorts of initiatives like this. Yes, you've got to put a very strong case forward to actually, pull money out of it. But then that's the way it has to be. We can't just afford to, throw money down a black hole where there's nothing coming out at the end.
Okay. Yep, some good points there, John. Thank you very much for your call. If you feel strongly about this, do you think it's good that the island has firm targets, or do you think it could play against us? Come on, Stu, as soon as these eco-mentalist tree huggers mention emissions, our road tax goes up. Well, yeah, there is that. The island can't save the planet. Well, that's a point of view, isn't it? And, should we even bother with targets for the Isle of Man? And, even at our worst, our level of pollution and all the rest of it, and CO2 emissions are just a blip on the radar of the UK. So is it worth even having targets and things here? Because there are costs involved in it. Are there any real benefits? Who cares? With that idiot in North Korea, we may not need to worry, says Dave. Oh, go on then, brighten the day up for us on a Friday, on a blowy Friday. Well, yes, I'm not worried so much about the idiot in North Korea. I'm more worried about the idiot that's going to inhabit the White House after the election. What else? It's no longer the case that electric vehicles are too costly to purchase. Really? Fairly new second-hand vehicles can be bought for under 10 grand with plenty of life left in them. The bigger issue now is the shortage of charging points around the island, particularly fast charge points. Is it? Okay. That's from Andrew. I don't know. I mean, the beauty of the Isle of Man and electric vehicles is that you're never that far from home. So do you really need to have fast charge points? I would have thought that the majority of people with electric cars would just stick them on charge at home in the driveway overnight. So you don't even need a fast charger for that. If it it can charge from a 13 amp plug, I think, overnight, can't it? And just do that every day. I would have thought, if you've ever had a car with a dodgy battery or a motorbike with a dodgy battery, you'll know what it's like to live like that. I had a dodgy battery on my motorbike a year or so ago, and so every night I'd drive it home, put it in the shed and stick it on the trickle charger, and that way at least I'd know it'd start the next day. It's just the same as if you've got an electric motorbike, I suppose. That's my view on it, that, do we really need to have fast charge points all over the island on the basis that most people will do them overnight? And Muriel says, Isle of Man government policy is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 80% of 1990 levels by 2050. That means bringing them down from the present 9.55 tonnes per person to 1.91 tonnes per person by 2050. The recent administration did very little and have left a 5-year action plan in the drawer for the newcomers who will be elected later this month. Let's hope the new crop of MHKs are more committed and actually do something about encouraging electric cars, raising building standards and getting some renewable energy on the island, etc. That from Muriel. Using CO2 emissions to calculate road tax on cars and vans was just an excuse for a massive hike in the cost to cover the DOI pensions. Complete and utter rip-off. How can a 125cc scooter be only £1 less to tax than a 1000cc car, says Steve. Yep. I think the Isle of Man has missed a trick, given its microstate to promote itself as a testbed for green technology, says one of our contributors. We should have more aggressive targets than larger nations, if anything. There's jobs in green technology. Okay, good point. Stu, I have a hybrid, a Prius, and it's very economic and car tax friendly. I get ridiculed for having one, but I only pay 47 quid a year for it. More newer hybrids don't pay any tax. And that's from Kev. Thank you, Kev. I've got a pal who's got a Lexus hybrid, and it's quite spooky when you first move off because it does it under electric power and there's just no engine noise at all, and then at some point the engine kicks in and you don't even hear it happening. You hit the nail on the head. If there's something in it for me, I'll have a punt. I wouldn't spend money if I wasn't going to get anything back, says Charles. The green bank could provide the capital outlay. Mine was £3,000. Can't see any other green product that will reduce usage by volume of 49% is really a no-brainer. Okay, thanks. Just a couple of points regarding the car charge points you mentioned about folk plugging in at home. Tourists don't necessarily have a drive to park up on and charge their car. Hotels and B&Bs probably don't provide such charging facilities either. Okay, fair dues. Ramsey have installed 4 free charge points, which is great, but unfortunately there are no time limits on these parking spots, so you see electric cars plugged in most of the day, thus hugging the only available limited spaces for the other electric car users. Just food for thought, says Keith. Okay, I'll take your word for it. If they've got 4 charging points, I wouldn't have thought there were that many electric cars in Ramsey, but obviously I'm wrong. Just come back from visiting my daughter in Scotland, and over there the road tax is 20 quid, and that's for the whole year. The bit that made me laugh is that you pay it in instalments, but it's only 20 quid for the year. How can they manage that? Quite easy if they've got the will. Government raises millions in duty on fuels. No one, but they don't encourage other uses. Right, fair dues. Good. Thanks for your comments on that.
Talking Heads, brought to you by Magic Carpets, with the only Carndine design showroom on the island.
That's it for the latest look back at Talking Heads. Our thanks as ever to everyone who contributed to the programme. If you'd like to get involved in the discussion, you can call, text or email between midday and 2 p.m. on weekdays, or you can share your thoughts at any time on the Facebook page. That's Talking Heads with Stu Peters. You can listen back to each day's programme in full using the on-demand section of manxradio.com, and the website's also where you'll get an update of what's being discussed on the programme each day. You can also keep up to date with that information by liking the Facebook page or following Stu Manx on Twitter. And if there's anything you think we should be discussing on the programme, let us know by emailing talk@manxradio.com. But that's it for now, so until next time, goodbye.
Don't sit in the slow lane. Join the fast lane right now with Shaw's all-new Superfast Plus broadband. Enjoy more bandwidth, amazing speeds and the best value on the island from just £23.95 per month. So don't be left behind. Get a piece of the high-speed action with Superfast Plus broadband from Shaw. For details, visit our stores in Douglas, Ramsey and Port Erin or click shaw.com.
Love being Shaw.
Terms and conditions apply.